Good afternoon. I guess we'll call the meeting of the General Employees Retirement or Pension Board to order. And I guess first ask for a roll call. Here.
Here.
Great. Good deal. Next up, if we could have everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes of the last meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? If no discussion, then all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Show none, unanimous approval. All right, sir. Mr. Chambers, how are you? I think we do.
Jackson was down. I've been doing this a long time. Whenever bond managers never lose money. This was a terrible year for bonds because of what the Fed's been doing. Bond managers do when they have bad numbers, they talk about the economy for about 20 minutes. That's all I could give away. So regrettably, this year, bonds and stocks were torn up at the same time, in double digits, and you all know why. We all read the same stuff. Last week we talked about what the Fed was probably going to continue to do in order to slow the economy down. They initially had two small increases in the Fed funds rate.
Then they introduced 4.75% increases, bringing it, we're up to like 4.25 or 4.5 right now, something like that. And we're all expecting a 0.5% increase tomorrow. That's consensus. It is what it is. When the Fed decides to manipulate interest rates down to zero, like they did for a number of years. During COVID, they took it all the way to zero, and then reverse course and take rates back up very quickly. It's going to damage the bond market. October, I'm gonna get into the report in a minute, but I'll give you the good news first. October, your results are actually pretty good. You're up about 4% in October. November up about maybe another 2.5%. So coming into December, the program was up around 6%, 6.5%. So it's possible that we have a very nice start to this new fiscal year. I should also add that the actuary uses a smoothing mechanism. Is it 4 or 5 years? 5. So you may recall that last year you had a very strong performance, and up around 20% or so. What the actuary did was Patrick took 1/5 of that great year and banked the other 4 years to use to offset going forward the next 4 years. So this bad year is going to be offset by last year, and you're going to see a gradual introduction of this bad year phased in over 5 years. I guess we can go to the summary. You may recall at the last meeting, when we left it was to initiate a 7% allocation of private real estate. That was completed in October. It doesn't show up in this report, but it is discussed on page 5. But anyway, on the top of page 4, summary, the plan lost $824,000 for the quarter, 4.4% net of expenses, slightly ahead of the strategic model, and that's because of the underweight among equities. And and we had some cash on hand in anticipation of funding the real estate. So that was another reason why it worked out that way. Cash was the best performer, believe it or not. You know, I remember a couple of years ago reading that the worst place to put your money was cash 2 years ago. And the best place to invest your money was emerging market debt. That's Chinese debt. Whereas Chinese debt has really completely come apart. And cash has been king. Anybody who's had cash all year, you haven't lost anything. It's been a year not to lose. And the only way you can do that was either cash or real estate and Putnam County. Small cap growth was the second best performer, believe it or not, at 0.4%. And the convertible bonds have pretty much exhausted their price repricing, which took place in the prior quarters. The fiscal year, which is the important one, plan was off 3.8 million or 17.5% net. I should mention that these are unrealized losses. In other words, we haven't been selling these negative returns. We have been waiting for the market to come back as it is so far in this new fiscal year. You have an allocation of short-term fixed income, which is a saving grace for you. It was down 4.9% for the year, and you'll see in just a minute how poorly the traditional fixed income has done. The 3 and 5 year numbers are here for illustration. You know, for years, we would report the 3 and 5 year performances, and they were generally in the 7.5%, 8% range. But the magnitude of this year decline was so large that this outlier year that has compressed the longer term averages. Let me take you to page 9. And this goes back 10 years ago. Plan was at 16.4 million. You see the net withdrawals over the 10-year period was about 7.6 million, and that's determined by the contributions made by the city, employee contributions minus expenses. Gained earnings for the period were 9.1 million. So the average return for 10 was 5.2 versus 5.5, which was the model. This decline, as I mentioned last year, 17.5%, really dragged down the longer term averages. It'd be interesting to see this quarter post a return of 6%, wouldn't it? That'd be sweet.
It's sweeter to post a return of 10%.
That'd be even sweeter. We'll see what happens. Go to page 12. This is how the allocations looked at the end of September. There was a large cash position, 2.7 million at the bottom there. Roughly 1.4 of that went to the next category, which is 0, but that was funded on October 1st. That left about 1.6 remaining, actually less than that, 1.3 remaining in cash. So going into this new fiscal year, we still had a fairly robust cash position. Have you had any payouts of any kind in the last couple months? So domestic equity at the end of the quarter was, at the end of the year, was 6.2% below the target. That's significant enough to mention. International is about 2.7% below. And I think if you sort of take that, the difference, it would be 7, let's see, 49. We got a pretty good allocation to cash. Looks like it's around 8% done. Yeah, around 8% cash. What we'll probably do is we'll see what happens tomorrow. That'll be the announcement of 0.5% increase. And see how the market responds tomorrow, but we will probably begin to move this cash back towards the 1% target between now and March, the next meeting. I should add that International has actually had a very good month, 2 months and a week or so, almost 2 weeks. International is up about 18%, versus about 11% for domestic large cap. And we're also focused on Ukraine, but what's happening in Europe and Central Europe is Americans are traveling there and spending money, a lot of money. The euro is at par with the dollar. It's now 105. I was just in France a few weeks ago and it was 95. It is cheap to go to Europe. And so Americans are spending so much money on leather goods, shoes, cosmetics, perfume, jewelry. What else do you spend money on? So the increase in sales of the high ticket items in Europe is up 40% from last year. And it's primarily wealthy Americans and to some extent Arabs. You see a lot of Arabs in London spending that kind of money. So that recession in Europe is to some extent being offset by the consumerism led by travelers visiting. Any questions about the disastrous results?
I guess I've just got one question about the cash part.
Yes.
Isn't inflation like 8%? Are we losing value of that money by having it sit on the side? And you can't get much interest. And I know our bank account, we don't get much interest on.
Yeah, it's interesting. You're right. You can't get much interest because it's sitting in a bank. Banks are still, they're gradually moving the needle, but we're probably getting close to 2% now on an annualized basis, maybe 2.5% on the cash. But that gets back to your very good question. We're long-term investors. We don't like to sit on cash and time the market. I think the reason why that we held this additional cash this long was the extraordinary circumstances. We had the election in November. What's happening in Europe and the war and all that. So all these uncertainties, we thought it was prudent to keep more cash than normal. But you all saw the consumer price and the producer price numbers came in better than expected. There is a gradual movement down on the inflation front. Did you see the numbers?
Mm-hmm.
That would suggest that the Fed may not be as draconian, as aggressive as they've been. And I've been telling people, this is actually before these numbers came out yesterday, that by spring, by Easter, well, that'll be the end of the Fed's rate increases. I think the market is going to be elevated by a view that rates are probably not going to go up a lot more. However, the economy is slowing down, and we are going to start to see some softening in earnings. And when we see earnings soften, it's a time to sort of pause. But I should mention, there are three stages in all this. The first stage is the market, stock market takes a big drop, and it did. The second stage is unemployment goes up. And the third stage is the economy goes to hell, okay? Got your attention. The only thing that's really happened so far is the first phase. We've got this big sell-off. The labor market is extremely strong right now. But we're just now beginning to see some weakness in some sectors of the economy. It's starting. We're starting to hear about layoffs occurring, but there's a lag effect. We'll know more about that probably getting into sometime next year. That's why I'm reaching out over to spring, because I think around Easter, I think the Fed will realize they see the caving in occurring and they're going to stop. That's my view. I think a lot of people have that view. That's an optimistic view. But having said that, the stock market actually reacts earlier. The stock market will begin to move upward, even though these other things are happening, they're kind of lagging. The stock market is already ahead of that. And that may be part of the reason why we've seen this stock market pop since October 1st. 11% for large cap, 18% for international. Even bonds are up about 2% since October 1st. So we're going to, consistent with the investment policy, we'll start to put the that cash money to work and work it back down to the 1%. We're going to do it kind of in baby steps, not all at one time. Any questions about these products or what we're trying to do on a macro level?
You said the real estate went into play in October, right?
October 1.
So what's the actual allocation percentage? Because I don't see it on the bar chart. I see our
Yeah,
target
well,
is 7.
Yeah, it's around 7, a little over 7%, about 7.2%.
Okay.
Now, you asked some very good questions before we did this. Obviously, you're a student in the real estate area. BlackRock has one of the largest private real estate funds in the country, and there's been a lot of news lately about BlackRock's fund. The redemptions that are being asked by investors really started with foreign investors, Asian investors who are trying to make capital calls, and then it's sort of moved over here for rebalancing purposes. Last year, with equities and bonds dropping 15%, and private real estate basically having a very good year, going up about 26%. Real estate became a larger piece of the pie. The denominator got smaller, and the real estate portion actually got bigger in the numerator, so it actually became a higher percentage above the target. And so there's some rebalancing going on the margin to trim back the imbalances. But I don't think we need to worry about it. We're long-term players here. If private real estate gets significantly cheaper next year, or by the end of the year, we could certainly consider adding more to it. But the weakness in private real estate is the marking down of two major sectors. First would be office. Some office property is being repurposed. I was in Boston a month ago, and big central Boston, a big, beautiful, I think it used to be the Fidelity headquarters or some big tower. Gutted out. It's going to be housing. So there are a lot of repurposing of like that is going on. And then malls in some of these areas in New Jersey, for example. I haven't seen it in Florida yet, but you see died out old malls that are being knocked down. They're pretty easy to knock down. And they're putting up residential. So that's going on. Residential is still very strong. I know there's a little softening of rents generally, but it's still a very strong market. Industrial is still very strong. So I think real estate in general is okay. How high rates go up and how long they stay up could have would certainly be a headwind, but these are all transient, short-term phases in the cycle. And I wouldn't be too concerned about it. Namely because American Realty, your advisor here, their leverage is low. Their leverage is only about 20%.
So let me ask a question. It's speculation, of course, but that's the game you play, isn't it? Speculation. What do you see happening if, let's say, the Russian Ukraine conflict ends in a fashion that's not catastrophic? I heard today that Putin has conceded that there may have to be some sort of agreed upon resolution of the conflict. So let's say they strike a deal and Ukraine's back in business, Crimea goes to Russia or something, which I think is they've been talking about, but the war's over and stuff. What do you see that doing to the European economic outlook and then trickling over to us?
I may have alluded to this last time, but it would be a boon for Europe. First of all, energy prices would come back down because I would assume that the Russians wouldn't be using their gas pipeline system. If you ever have a chance to look at a map of the array of pipelines from Russia into Europe, it's unbelievable how dependent Europe is on Russian gas.
Gas or oil?
Well, both, but I'm really talking about natural gas, but the curtailment of natural gas supplies to Europe has been devastating to industry. It's raised the price. Volkswagen announced the other day that they can't make cars profitably in Europe right now because the cost of electricity is so high. And aluminum is pretty much made in these electric furnaces. They liquefy it, they pour it into these, how they forge parts in aluminum. And they use electricity to generate the heat. And so Europe, primarily Germany, needs cheap energy to be competitive. And that's not what's happening right now. So it would help Europe's industrial capacity get back on its feet. Secondly, they got to rebuild Ukraine. And the companies that are going to be involved are going to be German companies, Italian companies, French companies. They're going to be providing everything you can imagine, building materials. And it's going to take a long time to rebuild that country. So there's a huge boon of business activity for Europe. So I think net, and then in our case, we're companies that are going to suffer if that happens are going to be Raytheon, Boeing, Donald Douglas, L3 Systems, all the companies here that make the weapons and all that, they're not going to like that. Did I answer your question? It'll be, in a way, Ukraine is a modern European Russia. It's what Russia really should be. A country that doesn't want to go to war with its and put its European neighbors in fear. They should all be, after all these wars, you think by now they'd all be together now, but they're not. Ukraine is such an important piece of the puzzle. Putin wants it back. He wants it. I don't think this is gonna end soon,
Yeah.
especially if they want Crimea. That's the golden egg because of its proximity to the Black Sea. How they get them out, I don't know how they get them out.
Okay.
I think it's it's interesting that Finland, and we're gonna spend Christmas or New Year's with 4 Finns. They call them, they're coming over to visit us. They call them Finns. It's easier to say than Finlanders, but we're gonna get some insight on what's happening in Finland, but they are really tough people. They're like Vikings. They have a huge border with Russia. And now they're joining NATO. That's pretty gutsy. And it's interesting. The former leaders of Finland all these years have been males that pacified Russian. And now they have a woman leader of Finland. She's tough. I'm not going to pacify them anymore. We're going to become a member of NATO. We don't care what Russia says.
Yeah, we got hell in the kitchen now.
Yeah. What
You hear
else?
that, Miss Val? She must be asleep.
Is there anything else for now? Okay. All set? Oh, I'll wait, see what Anna has. to say.
Did we accept the report?
Any other questions then? Any other questions? If there are no other questions, then do I have a motion to accept? Did you move, Brett?
I'll make the motion to accept the report as given.
Second?
Second.
Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. Hey, is Miss Parrish on the phone?
See her up there.
Can
Hello,
you hear
I'm
me?
sorry.
There you go.
I didn't realize I was muted. I apologize.
Not a
Okay, so
problem.
just 2 quick updates. This one is more informational. There's nothing that the board needs to do, just something to be aware of. The SEC adopted a rule to make proxy voting more transparent to investors. So this is a good thing. You'll see they're using a new disclosure form. It'll use a computer format to make it easier to search. It'll use standardized order of information disclosure. You'll be able to see the number of shares voted, the number of shares loaned, those recalled, not recalled for voting purposes. So we are happy about this. Just something to be aware of moving forward. Again, no steps for the board to take. Just an FYI. This next memo is in regards to a recent Delaware corporate law change that now permits companies to insulate corporate officers from liability for reckless conduct. This typically would only apply to boards of directors, but they are now allowing for an expansion of this. In order to do this, they will have to revise their charter, which will require a vote of the shareholders. Since the fund doesn't vote their own proxies, we are recommending that either your investment policy guidelines be updated to include this proxy information, or it can be adopted separately, or it can be a discussion with each manager, letting them know, hey, we want you to vote no on this. With the last meeting, we agreed to amend the investment policy for now, just as an addendum, adopting this language that we have recommended, and then we will amend it, the next time we have a change. So if you all are happy with that, we can certainly do that. If you have a separate policy, that is fine. However you want to proceed, just again, something to be aware of, that we are not in favor of this change, and we would advise our managers to vote no.
At the prior meeting, Burgess had mentioned that Anna is working on an addendum already that that we could accept as a temporary measure until the policy can be changed, because it has to go through here to be changed and then changed at the commission level through multiple readings. But as an addendum, it would be changed immediately. Isn't that correct, Burgess?
That's correct.
So we do currently have a proxy voting policy.
We don't, we have a policy that we could add this addendum to.
So as I understand it, if we accept this recommendation, we're communicating to all the fund managers that if and when these companies or these institutions try and change their charter, we're communicating that we want them to vote no.
Correct.
So all we would need is a motion. Yes. As an addendum to our policy.
Do you all have a comfort level as far as what this really in the end does to protect you or to protect the plan?
I don't.
I mean, it says it right there. Basically, this law allows them to change their charter where the financial officer or the executive officer essentially would no longer have liability for their negligent conduct.
And really, Anna, can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can.
Isn't that any officer of the corporation?
Yes, yes. So they're now expanding it to both boards of directors and officers of corporations. Typically, it would just be at the board of director level, which has been a longstanding practice, and something I could understand, but they're now expanding it really to a much wider group of individuals. So any officer from the company would be excluded from negligence.
And I'm just curious, what's the genesis of this advisory that going out to your clients? Who started it?
We were updated from BLBG, Bernstein, Litowitz, Berger, and Grossman. They kind of alerted us that this law was changed in Delaware, and it might affect your fund's ability to collect from companies that have acted negligently going forward. So obviously this is not something that we're in support of. But we were alerted from the securities monitoring firm.
So the current law does not protect officers. It's the change that would protect the officers.
That's correct. So I believe it already
Okay.
changed.
All right.
But in order for the change, to be made permanent, each of the companies would have to revise their charter. So steps will need to be taken. They will have to have a vote of the shareholders. And that's where the proxy would come in.
So I'll admit, I don't know that I understand all that I know about this at this point. Reading the summary that's in front of us, it indicates that the law essentially exempted directors from personal liability for breaching their duty of care unless they acted in bad faith or for self-interest. Now, if I understand the memo, it simply states that while that had earlier been afforded only to members of boards of directors, now it's being afforded to corporate officers, making them essentially, again, not financially liable for breaching a duty of care, which would be normally in Florida, you think of that as a simple negligence sort of standard, but they would be liable still if they acted in bad faith or for self-interest. So help me, do I understand that they're just extending the protection that is already in place from directors to officers?
Yes, you are correct. It just really expands, from the board of directors, a few people, into any corporate officer.
So help me understand the proxy thing. I don't understand what you're asking. What are we asking? What are you asking
So-
us?
The proxy comes in that in order for these companies to basically take advantage of this new law, they will have to amend their charter. In order to do that, they need a vote of the shareholders. So the board, does not attend the shareholder meetings. Their investment managers are proxy voting on their behalf. So this would basically let the investment managers who are voting on the board's behalf know, listen, this is how we feel about this, and we want you to vote no. We do not want the charter to be amended to
We're letting
allow.
them know in advance.
We don't want them
Correct.
to extend, so we
That's
don't
right.
want them to extend the protection to the officers.
That is correct.
Okay. All right. So what do you
the
need? to know?
proxy, right, the proxy just comes in that the managers are voting on your behalf. So having this, typically when we engage a new investment manager, they ask for the investment policy guidelines to make sure that everything is being followed. The fund, can only invest in certain ways. So this will just be another guideline that they're aware of once they're engaged.
So you're looking for us to weigh in on whether we wish to vote against extending the protection to officers, the protection which already exists in favor of directors. What's the pleasure of the board?
I'm in favor with the recommendation.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, unanimously approved.
Okay, great. So you all will receive, essentially the same addendum as the other board. It'll be sort of a general, that's going out to the clients who have requested this.
All right,
And that is all for me, unless there's any questions.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention.
You're welcome.
quarterly expenditures, would that be you, Miss Jill?
Yes, the quarterly expenditures are on the screen right now and you have copies. This is actually because it's the end of the year. It's from October through September. It's not just the quarterly, it's the year end total expenditures.
Anything there that's unusual or the
No.
board, the board sees the expenditures also? Are there any of them that the board has questions about? As long as Mr. Bush leaves his in, we're solvent.
We will have several people coming out of drop this coming year.
Any questions? Have a motion to accept? Second,
I'll second the motion.
any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting dates for 2023.
These are the dates that I've contacted Burgess and about and our actuary as well, to be sure that these are dates that they can work with. We've moved the dates back about a month, 3 weeks to a month, in order to allow for more time if meetings have to be canceled due to no quorums, and also because our investments in the real estate require more advance notice, and they only happen quarterly, so we kind of have to make decisions earlier in the quarter.
Anybody have a problem with the dates? Only one of them is of significance to me. I have no problem with it. We just accept it by consensus then.
The August one?
Nope, it's the February one.
Oh.
Public comments, I don't see people standing in line, so unless there's somebody in Zoom land. Other business, Brett Dennis, fifth member term expires January 2023.
Yes. So at the end of this January, your term will expire. You have the option of renewing.
Mhm.
And Sunny, if she hasn't gotten you paperwork yet, she will.
Okay,
Okay.
You interested in renewing?
I am. I represent my department.
No, I think it'd be wise.
Yeah.
I think it'd be a good thing.
And
let's
then
make su-
after, we would vote on it at the next
Sure.
meeting in February, and then it'll go to the commission.
Would you make sure Sonny gets the packet to him? Is there anything else to be brought before the board? If not, folks, thank you. We'll stand adjourned. Sir?
Charging stations. Tesla car.
We don't want that damn commie pinko stuff up here. The hell you just